before the son ever ran away, before the inheritance was divided, before shame ever entered the road home, there was a father who had already decided something no one noticed. The story most people think they know doesn't begin with rebellion. It begins with waiting. Picture the first sound. Not music, not words, just wind moving through dry grass, early morning light touching the edge of a small village, and a man standing at the threshold of his home, eyes fixed on a road that has been empty for far too long. He's not angry. He's not pacing. He's not rehearsing a speech. He's watching. And here's the unsettling question that hooks us immediately. Why does a father keep watching a road long after hope should have died? Because the real parable was never about the prodigal son. It was always about the one who refused to stop waiting. And here's the thing. I'm serious. Most people have missed this father completely. The younger son is easy to understand. We know rebellion. We know impulse. We know the hunger to leave, to prove ourselves, to chase freedom even when it costs everything. The older son is familiar too. We know duty. We know obedience without joy. We know bitterness disguised as righteousness. But the father behaves in ways that should disturb us. Because no Middle Eastern patriarch in that time would ever act like this man does. And that's where the tension begins. When the younger son asked for his inheritance, what he was really saying was, "I wish you were dead." And in that culture, such words weren't just insulting. They were unforgivable. A father had every right, socially, legally, morally, to disown such a son, to cut him off, to erase his name. But this father doesn't argue. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't lecture. He divides his life. And when the son leaves, the father does something no one expects. He lets him go. No chase. No guards. No threats. Just silence and waiting. And listen closely here. This is where most tellings of the story rush past the most important detail. The father does not stop being a father when the son leaves. He does not emotionally detach. He does not move on. Every morning he walks to the edge of the property. Every evening he stands where the road curves out of sight. And every time footsteps approach that aren't the ones he's longing for, something inside him aches. Quietly. Years pass. The son falls further than he ever imagined. Money gone. Friends gone. Dignity gone. And when famine hits, the lowest moment comes, not hunger, not poverty, but this. No one gave him anything. That line should haunt us. Because that's the sound of the world when it's done using you. Meanwhile, back home, the father is still watching. Here's what most people don't realize. In ancient villages, news travels fast. The father would have heard whispers, stories, rumors. He's wasting everything. He's with immoral people. He's ruined. And every rumor would have given the father permission to stop hoping. But hope isn't something this father waits for. Hope is something he chooses. And then one day, a silhouette appears on the horizon. It's barely recognizable. Thin, bent, moving slowly. And before the son can rehearse his apology, before he can explain, before he can beg, the father runs. And that single word should shock us. Men of honor did not run. They especially did not run toward shame. To run meant lifting his robes, exposing his legs, humiliating himself publicly. But here's the truth no one talks about. The Father is not running to the Son. He's running past what the village would do to him. Because if the villagers reached the Son first, they could legally perform a ceremony of rejection, public shaming, cutting him off forever. So the Father runs to absorb the shame himself. And listen. This is the moment the story turns from emotional to unbearable. The Son starts his speech. I have sinned. But the Father interrupts him. No interrogation and no probation, no conditions. The robe, the ring, the sandals, and each one restoring identity, authority, belonging. And then the feast. Joy erupts. Music fills the house. Laughter replaces silence. But the story is not finished. Because outside the light, another son stands in the dark. The older son refuses to enter. And now, the Father does something even more unthinkable. He leaves the celebration. A second humiliation. A second pursuit. He pleads. And this is where the parable becomes deeply uncomfortable for religious people. The older son's words reveal a heart that never loved the Father, only the reward. I've served you. I've obeyed. You never gave me. Listen. The older son was physically close, but emotionally distant. And the Father responds not with anger, but with grief. My son, everything I have is yours. And here's the shocking truth most people miss. The story ends without resolution. We never find out if the older son enters. Why? Because the parable was never meant to end on paper. It was meant to end in the listener. And now we arrive at the unseen parable, the waiting Father. Because the Father in the story represents Jesus Christ's revelation of God. A God who absorbs shame. A God who runs toward brokenness. A God who waits without resentment. A God who doesn't just forgive rebels, but pleads with the righteous. And listen to me. This is where it gets personal. Some of you watching are the younger son. You ran. You failed. You think it's too late. Others are the older son. You stayed. You served. But somewhere along the way, joy died. And some of you are realizing something unsettling. You've never understood the Father at all. Because the greatest shock of this parable isn't forgiveness. It's love without control. The Father doesn't force anyone inside. Not the rebel. Not the obedient. He waits. And here's the truth that should leave you silent at the end of this video. God is still standing on the road. Still watching. Still waiting. Not because he is weak, but because love refuses to coerce. And now, listen closely, because this is the moment that matters. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt seen, exposed, comforted, or unsettled, that is not an accident. That is invitation. Now let the story step out of dust and sandals and walk straight into our world. Because the waiting Father didn't stay in a village 2,000 years ago. He stepped into highways, hospital rooms, prison cells, corporate offices, lonely apartments glowing with phone screens at 2 a.m. Listen, the modern world is louder than that ancient road, but the silence inside people is the same. Today, the younger son doesn't always leave with bags of gold. Sometimes he leaves with ambition, with a scholarship, with a job offer in another city, with a phone full of dreams and a heart convinced that freedom lives somewhere else. He leaves faith quietly. One missed prayer becomes many. One compromise becomes a lifestyle. One "I'll come back later" stretches into years. And no one claps when he finally realizes he's empty. Because here's the thing. The modern famine isn't food. It's meaning. People are surrounded by comfort and starving for purpose. Connected to everyone and known by no one. Scrolling endlessly, searching desperately, smiling publicly while collapsing privately. And when the fall comes, it comes hard. A business fails. A marriage breaks. An addiction tightens its grip. A diagnosis changes everything. A secret finally surfaces. And just like the prodigal, the modern soul whispers, "How did I end up here?" Meanwhile, the waiting father hasn't changed. He's still watching roads that look like email inboxes, hospital hallways, courtrooms, therapy offices, church doors people are afraid to walk back through. And listen, this is where the parable becomes almost uncomfortable in our time. Because modern religion often behaves more like the older brother than the father. Rules without relationship. Truth without tenderness. Correctness without compassion. People don't leave faith because they hate God. Many leave because they never met the Father. And here's the quiet shock. God is not pacing heaven with crossed arms. He's watching, not with disappointment, but with longing. And when someone finally turns, even slightly toward home, he still runs. He runs toward the addict who relapsed again, the believer who doubts, the pastor who burned out, the parent who failed, the teenager who thinks they've ruined everything. And yes, he runs toward people the internet has already canceled. Because the Father's love has never been algorithm-driven. And now, the older son in the modern world. He sits in pews, leads Bible studies, volunteers, serves faithfully. But deep inside, he's angry. Angry that grace seems unfair. Angry that broken people get celebrated. Angry that obedience didn't shield him from pain. And listen carefully. This is one of the most dangerous places to be. Close to God, but far from his heart. The modern older brother measures worth by performance. Tracks faith like a resume. Believes God owes him something. And when grace disrupts the system, resentment rises. But the Father still goes out to him, not to shame him, not to argue theology, but to invite him into joy. And here's the truth that lands hardest in our generation. God does not force anyone to celebrate grace. You can live your entire life in the Father's house and never know the Father. That's why this parable matters now more than ever. Because we live in a world obsessed with leaving and terrified of returning. People fear they'll be judged, rejected, exposed. But the waiting Father already absorbed the shame. He always has. And here's the revelation that should stop you right where you are. The cross wasn't God waiting for us to clean up. It was God running toward us at our worst. The resurrection wasn't God saying, "I told you so." It was God saying, "The door is still open." And now, right here, right now, this parable becomes a mirror. Where are you standing? On the road home, unsure if you're welcome. In the field, angry but faithful. Or at the door, deciding whether love is worth surrender, because the ending is still unwritten. And listen, I mean this gently. God is not waiting for a perfect apology. He's waiting for a turn, even a small one. And if you felt something stir while listening to this, that wasn't emotion manipulation. That was recognition. So here's the final invitation. Slow down. Breathe. And remember, you are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. The Father is still watching. And now, let it go even deeper. Because the modern world doesn't just pull people away from the Father through rebellion. It distracts them into forgetfulness. Listen. No one announces it, "Today I will abandon God." It happens quietly. One Sunday becomes optional. One prayer becomes shorter. One conviction becomes flexible. One truth becomes just my truth. And suddenly faith isn't rejected, it's postponed. That's the modern road away from home. People don't walk it with defiance. They drift. And here's the chilling part. Drifting feels peaceful at first. No conflict. No guilt. No tension. Until the silence sets in. And then people try to fill it. With achievement. With entertainment. With relationships. With constant noise. But nothing stays full. And the Father notices something the world doesn't. He notices when a heart grows tired. That moment when success stops satisfying. When pleasure feels hollow. When the question rises quietly at night. Is this really all there is? That question is the road turning. And listen, God does not wait for collapse to welcome you back. He watches for the turn, even the smallest one. A whispered prayer, a tear no one sees, a search typed into a phone at midnight, a video like this playing when you didn't plan on it. And I need to say this slowly, because someone needs it. Conviction is not rejection. Restlessness is not punishment. Longing is not weakness. They are invitations. The modern world teaches you to fix yourself first. The Father says, "Come as you are." The modern world says, "Earn your way back." The Father says, "I already paid." The modern world says, "You are what you did." The Father says, "You are my child." And now, the most unsettling truth of all. The Father waits not only for prodigals, but for entire generations. Generations raised on information but starving for wisdom. Surrounded by opinions but desperate for truth. Confident online and broken offline. And yet, God has not changed his posture. He hasn't turned his back. He hasn't rewritten the invitation. He still stands at the edge of the road, And listen carefully here, because this is the moment most people miss. The Father doesn't shout down the road. He doesn't drag anyone home. Love that must be forced isn't love. So he waits, not because he is distant, but because he is respectful. Not because he is absent, but because he is patient. And now, this story presses against your life, because you don't just hear this parable. You stand inside it. Every choice you make, every turn you take, every delay, every step. It's all happening on the road. And here's the shock that settles everything. The Father's joy does not begin when you arrive. It begins when you turn. That means hope is closer than you think. So if your faith feels weak, turn. If your heart feels heavy, turn. If you're tired of pretending you're fine, turn. You don't have to run. You don't have to perform. You don't have to explain everything perfectly. Just turn. Because the Father is already moving. And now, as this story comes to rest, let it rest gently. You are not alone in your questions. You are not abandoned in your failures. You are not invisible in your waiting. The road home has never closed. And here's my heartfelt request to you. If this parable spoke to your soul, like this video, share it, and subscribe to Parables of Hope. Your support allows us to keep creating stories that don't just entertain, but transform. Go back and watch the previous parables on this channel. Let them speak to you. Let them walk with you. And please, share this message with someone who needs to know that the road home is still open. Because the waiting Father has not moved, and he never will. Until next time, may you walk closer to God. May truth win, and may hope never stop calling your name.